my name is Harley and welcome to the Royalty. Do you want to know how Space Marines are created? Do you want to know how to become a Space Marine? Then this is the video for you. Let's do this.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to my royal patrons. My tier 2 royalty, Izzo, and my tier 1 royalty, Hansel Panda, Suki SJ, Sternly, Dan Cohen, Chaos 315, Matt Ben, and Dale Near End. Your support allows me to make my content sponsor free.
I am so ready. Let's go, Luton. On the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Only war. Is he speaking? Is this like the other one where it was copyrighted at the beginning?
They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give themselves to me.
Okay.
Like clay I shall mould them, and in the furnace of war I shall forge them. They shall be of iron will and steely sinew. In grey armour I shall clad them, and with the mightiest weapons they shall be armed.
Let's go.
They will be untouched by plague or disease, no sickness shall blight them. They shall have such tactics, strategies and machines that no foe will best them in battle.
Not a single one.
They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my Space Marines. And they shall know no fear.
Shut up, Emperor.
Space Marines are humanity's most elite fighting force.
Good to know.
They're the defenders of civilization, but their immense power is forged through a harsh selection process, extreme genetic and body modifications. This grueling transformation kills many recruits, and those who do survive it are left arguably barely human. The conversion from weak mortal to demi-godlike superhuman is one gifted to only a tiny amount of humans in the 41st millennium.
To be fair, that is true. Considering there's caps on them, there's probably a lot less than there used to be.
An Astartes, when his transformation is complete, will be stronger, tougher, mentally more powerful by factors than an ordinary human.
Move it faster makes us stronger.
And while a Space Marine's prime mission is to protect humanity, their physical disparity from ordinary common humans can actually leave many Astartes to look down on these lesser common humans.
Listen here, I know this is true, but it's offensive.
While others will feel a renewed sense of dedication to protect those who can barely protect themselves. It's important to remember that Space Marines are the defenders of humanity and not the rulers of it.
Yeah.
Humans, for better or worse, have been the leaders of the Imperium of Man until recently with the return of Primarch Roboute Guilliman. While the transformation of a human to Space Marine is complex, you'll often hear the terminology of a gene seed be used. Now, a gene seed is not literally a seed, but it is a specific organ that each Astartes carries with seed-like qualities.
That's gross.
It's a term used to describe generally the genetic material of an Astartes. It's more accurately the cells and DNA required to engineer a human into an Astartes.
Which, you know, just messing with DNA, like, this is fine.
The gene seed, more specifically though, refers to the Space Marines' progenoid glands, and the clue is in the name there when you think of progeny. These organs in a Space Marine respond to the other genetic implants they have and replicate DNA. Essentially, they are, in a manner of speaking, an asexual form of reproduction, which...
Are you just telling me that Space Marines are asexual?
Which is why when a Space Marine is fatally wounded on a battlefield, an apothecary will fight to recover his gene seed. It's also why, yes, Space Marines do not require heterosexual reproduction.
KK!
5 years from implantation, a Space Marine's neck progeny glands can be harvested, but the chest glands won't...
Actually, that's the alternative of kinky. Not kinky!
...be harvested up until 10 years. Space Marines essentially depend on themselves to produce new Marines for the chapter. Lastly, in this general sphere of discussion, to answer a very commonly discussed topic, are Space Marines actually castrated? And then, how do they excrete waste? Well...
Was this the pressing question? What, these? These were the questions you needed the answer to? Okay, Luton.
But I can't actually recall anywhere in written law this being noted, so if anybody has a specific point of reference, please do link it. But my speculation, based on a few things that I've kind of looked at, is that pretty much the canon opinion is that Space Marines have no sexual drive. However, when it comes to excretion, it's true that their armour is also an environment suit that would cycle and process their own waste, much like a still suit in the Dune universe. Also, Space Marines do not live in their armour, although they may wear it for extended periods of time. It can be removed.
But would you remove it?
It's entirely possible that their external genitals are removed and they have
This is not what I thought I'd be talking about today.
plants to take care of waste, but I've got nothing to see that it points towards this. So it's an unknown, but it's not something that's critically really important in the scheme of things.
And that's kind of what I'm saying. Do we need to be asking these questions?
It's equally possible that it's just seen as an organ as with everything else and they just leave it all be.
Do you think the Mechanicus have enhanced,
Now, before we look further into how a Space Marine is forged in the 41st millennium, let's remind ourselves how they were created over history. Now, the first form of Space Marine was originally created by the Emperor during the unification wars of the late 30th millennium. Earth at this time was a barren wasteland of scavengers and barbaric warring tribes after civilization had imploded as a result of the Age of Strife. Earth, being cut off from its supply routes in the warp, cannibalized itself and fell into total anarchy.
Yuck.
After the Emperor originally created techno-barbarians, a crude adapted form of super soldier, he would form them later into the Thunder Warriors.
I'm pretty sure the Thunder Warriors are all dead.
These warriors were brutal, powerful, and most importantly, highly unstable. The Emperor knew that he wouldn't be able to work with these soldiers forged in the fires of anarchy beyond the unification of Earth's warring tribes. And so he secretly constructed his genetic facilities in a fortress deep below vast mountain ranges on Earth.
But they want to stop the Mechanicus from doing experiments with AI, but they can just do genetic experiments all they want. I see how it is then.
Here, he would, with some few remaining gene rights, create his Primarchs using his own genetic material as a template.
He jizzed in a cup.
Then subsequently, the very first of the new breed of warriors, the Space Marines, or Astartes. But what are the Thunder Warriors? Imperial records state that the Thunder Warriors were nearly all wiped out during a particularly bloody battle at the end of the Unification Wars on
I told you I thought they were dead.
Mount Ararat. Conveniently, the new Legiones Astartes were created readily to replace them.
Convenient.
Now, records from this time are understandably fragmented, but described eyewitness accounts from the few Thunder Warriors to survive this battle, like Eric Tyrannus, stated that it was in fact the Emperor himself who massacred the Thunder Warriors. Others have stated that it was also in collaboration with his custodian guard. In several instances that occurred since this time where Thunder Warriors have appeared and faced their Astartes brothers, the Thunder Warriors have nearly always managed to inflict casualties beyond expectation before they are finally felled.
So y'all are killing them, but they're trying. They're still working on it.
This gives some indication of how powerful they were as warriors, and why the Emperor felt they were perhaps too dangerous, given their power and psychological instability, to function as a disciplined fighting and defensive force for the new Imperium.
You just wanted everyone in your image because you have a god complex, whether or not you admit it.
Regardless, this whole situation is a dark and little spoken of episode for the Emperor of Man. Vocalizing these events would no doubt have some Inquisition or ecclesiarchy on their way to you very promptly. With the Thunder Warriors killed in the Battle of Mount Ararat, the new Space Marines, the Legiones Astartes, would come to the fore. Unlike their Thunder Warrior forebears, they would undergo rigorous mental training as well as physical and genetic modifications.
But yet the mechs can't experiment.
This would give them immense physical traits, as well as being near unbreakable with their mental conditioning. The new Marines were initially segregated into 20 legions. This separation was not for simple organizational purposes. Each legion was imbued with genetic traits from their Primarch, and as such this impacted their character and behavior.
as well as cause a few issues. I'm looking at you, Redthirst.
To ensure unity, the Emperor designated them to stay together in their legions to reduce friction and ensure cohesion of the Astartes brothers.
And then kill them and separate them.
Through recruiting and conquest of human colonies, as the Imperium expanded, so did the Astartes legions. What had begun as a handful of Marines swelled to tens of thousands during the Crusades. This would lead later to heavy damage caused during the heresy after the Primarchs holding such immense power, being the sole commanders of each Space Marine legion. After that period of chaotic incursion, Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, would draft the Codex Astartes, and
which I still think was a huge mistake.
the remaining loyalist Primarchs would, after much consideration, agree at best that the Space Marine legions be split into chapters. This was to ensure no Space Marine legion could wield the sheer weight of power they had during the Crusades and subsequent heresy. This was known as the Second Founding.
But also this can cause a huge issue because Chaos isn't going to follow this, so how are you going to defend against the huge Chaos chapters?
Each of these chapters would take a permanent homeworld or fortress monastery in the Imperium. The Codex Astartes states that each chapter would be 1,000 battle brothers in number and manage its own recruitment. A specific development in the creation of a Space Marine was discovered after the Horus Heresy: weaknesses in the gene seed. Now, as I previously explained, the gene seed is the core biological component in the creation of a Space Marine. During the Heresy, Space Marines were created on a massive scale, and as with any biological replication process, if you do this on a large scale, then mutations and errors can occur in this DNA replication.
And boy did they!
So another result of the implementation of the Codex Astartes by Guilliman was to slow the process of creating a Space Marine, to more closely monitor their genetic material and the material implanted within new recruits to ensure purity and expunge defects. Guilliman would also establish core genetic banks on Terra to ensure a stock of genetics existed. These pure sources would provide new material for the foundings of Astartes chapters and also prevent any further contamination. As previously described, each chapter is responsible for its own replenishment. It chooses where and how to locate potential Space Marine candidates. Many will recruit solely from their own homeworld, but others will reach out to hive worlds of the Imperium to locate powerful and resilient fighters who have shown promise and an unnatural ability in combat.
Unnatural ability.
Even potentially recruiting from gang fighters in hive cities.
Yeah, there's some that even recruit from the deep dark depths of the hive cities that are literally the worst people that have ever existed, and they decide, you know what you need? Godlike powers.
Feral planets can also be good for selection, as the humans here are physically tough and have to deal with daily hardships more frequently than some other Imperial planets. Surprisingly, less recruits actually appear from the militaristic worlds like fortress planets, maybe because although knowing lives of military discipline, they haven't endured the true horror and hardships that come from the rougher ends of Imperial life. Any candidate for a Space Marine will be usually young, between the ages of 10 and 15 years old.
Yo, what the fuck?
Obviously they need to be strong, healthy and fiercely loyal to the Imperium. Often on worlds where recruitment occurs, young male humans who show exceptional skill or strength are pushed hard to give them the best chance of potential recruitment.
I would not let a 10-year-old join the Astartes.
Candidates can occasionally be as old as 20, but the full effect of their biological conversions may not be as effective or complete. Standard trials for Space Marine recruitment often involve combat, endurance, perhaps hunting of some extremely dangerous indigenous animal, and for the few who survive the tasks set by the Astartes who are there to supervise.
Imagine like going through the recruitment just to die in the recruitment.
The rewards are beyond estimation. It's difficult to describe just how revered Space Marines are to ordinary citizens of the Imperium. While they wouldn't be directly worshipped, they are certainly individuals with godlike reverence and awe.
Like I said, you're making a 10-year-old a god, essentially, a demigod, essentially.
Many humans in the Imperium will go their entire lives without ever even seeing an Astartes, and they may only arrive on an Imperial planet once in a generation. On some worlds, they are even somewhat mythical. So for a family on an Imperial world to have their son chosen for Space Marine recruitment and candidacy would be an honour beyond imagination. but from some perspectives bittersweet, in as all likelihood they may never see them again once they have been accepted. And
yeah, imagine just losing your kid at 10 and just being like, my kid's been picked. He's never coming back. See you later, kid. Never gonna see you again. Hope you don't die, like, in a year.
and in very high possibility will probably die in later processes. But it's nonetheless the highest honour to serve the Emperor and the Imperium in this way, and would no doubt lead to adulation, even possible special treatment for families after the fact. Ordinary citizens understand that to be accepted for the conversion to the Astartes, the Emperor's chosen warriors, is nothing short of becoming a demigod. Then again, you could just as easily have been recruited from a hive world full of daily extreme violence, and your gang was just forcibly made to participate in the trials, and you were simply the only one left alive at the end.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So that's your flip side of the coin. Pray you never seek acceptance to the Grey Knights. I'll cover that later. Despite all the
I was thinking about them.
physical and mental requirements for candidacy, another element is spiritual purity. In the 41st millennium, imperial society is heavily religious, worshipping the god emperor, and most importantly decrying the ruinous powers of chaos. Chaplains and the ecclesiarchy will continually monitor society around Astartes' recruitment sources to ensure that there are no signs of taint by the dark forces of chaos.
Taint.
With the easy part over, the selected candidates, now known as aspirants, will begin the ritual process of becoming a Space Marine. This may be a formal process of reciting scripture, or it could involve further trials. These could take place on the homeworld or result in immediate departure for the aspirant. Each chapter has their own private and guarded initiations. Some of these can be heavily traumatic and are usually significantly harder tests designed to break those who show even the smallest cracks of weakness. These trials for the young aspirants may even include ritual slaughter, scarification, even amputation and bloodletting.
Imagine being 10 and someone says this to you. In what world do you be like, yeah, like, this is chill, this is what I want?
It's all designed to prove
Psychos.
their commitment, loyalty and unwavering faith in the Astartes chapter. Unsurprisingly, some aspirants do not pass this phase of testing physically or mentally.
Really?
Aspirants will continue periods of testing and examination as well as actual live combat during their period as a recruit for the Space Marine chapter. And some of these trials may be cleverly disguised as coming-of-age rituals, other celebrations some more combat-based. All, though, will be observed carefully by senior members of the chapter and chaplains who will be assessing key traits and behaviours, looking for candidates who fulfil their exacting requirements. Some of these aspirants from Fira worlds or even other worlds may not be truly aware of what Space Marines are, and this innocence may in some way protect them from making overthought errors that cost them later. Still, some chapters actually take little interest in these early stages and will only actually become involved later once aspirants have been further thinned down. The whole process is a physical and psychological minefield. Some challenges could be unachievable, while others the simple act of survival is enough to merit approval to progress to the next stage.
Okay, but how would they treat the family of someone if your son was sent off to become a Space Marine and then they died in the aspirant phase? Would they be like, LMAO, you kid sucked? Or will they be like, damn, he was a good one, shame?
All the tests put to Space Marine aspirants are designed to test every element of their being to the limit and expose any weaknesses that are present, as well as learn about how they handle and make judgments on situations they are presented with. While the recruitment age for these aspirants is undoubtedly young, it's worth remembering that the nightmare environment of the 41st millennium is undoubtedly very harsh, and so growing up and becoming an adult quickly is something which many learn to do, and so their age shouldn't necessarily dictate your judgment of them based on our current period in time.
Alright, but 10? I know you can, like, at 15, I'm like, you know, I'm not happy about it, but I get it. Even up to, like, 13. But, like, 10?
Standard Astartes trials for these young recruits can include knowledge of self. Astartes look at recruits' mental strength equally to the physical. The horrors they will face in their lives as a Space Marine, despite later conditioning, require the strongest character in a recruit to be successful and worthy. They may use a chapter librarian to impose psychic horrors on a recruit to see if they survive the nightmares they're forced to witness. He may be forced to take drugs and face the worst parts of his own psyche. The stress and trauma of this trial can often physically affect their bodies as well, so in many ways this becomes the ultimate test for recruits. Completion of this trial will undoubtedly fundamentally alter the young recruit forever. Some chapters, like the Imperial Fists, consider this kind of mental testing especially important.
Yeah, let's just ruin this kid.
But do so by exposing their recruits to literal physical pain, and we use devices like these
Pain gloves!
subtly titled Pain Glove. These hook into the nervous system of the recruit and inflict horrific pain, but also maintain their consciousness well past what a normal individual could handle.
See, I even knew about the pain gloves.
The result will either be a mentally toughened but probably scarred individual, or a complete mental breakdown and death. An obvious and standard test for many recruits is exposure. Most worlds of the Imperium have unforgiving environments, and so sending out recruits into these wastes with little to survive with is an easy way to tell who is strong enough as a candidate. Space Marine apothecaries can rebuild damaged individuals, so the test is less of can you survive without consequences, and more simply, can you survive?
Can you not breathe without oxygen? Out. Out! The oxygen levels on this planet are too low to survive on. Out!
Many worlds are severely irradiated, frozen wastes, toxic wastelands, or ashen wastes, where planets have suffered total ecological collapse. Alternately, a planet could also be a literal jungle full of horrific creatures, small and large, ready to tear you to pieces or just melt your face off.
Nice!
As stated, the test is simple: survive for a set period of time. It will also likely involve some object of crossing a distance from A to B, so as to avoid recruits just digging a hole somewhere and sitting in it until time has elapsed.
You know what? They're the smart ones.
Some of the tests could well be impossible to complete and are simply assessing who can survive longest or travel furthest before dying or near death.
They're just there, they're like, he got pretty far. He's nearly dead, but he got pretty far. Should we get him? No. Yeah? No? Maybe?
The Ultramarines and Space Wolf chapters are known to favour exposure testing. A fairly self-explanatory trial, recruits are pitted against one another in one-on-one combat. When the last few remain, the assessing Astartes will usually halt the assessment. The type of duel could vary between armed or unarmed combat, consecutive combat, or recruits switching out on completing rounds.
You know what? That's actually something that you do in martial arts. So they'll send like 10 guys at you one after the other. And you've just got to keep fighting and keep going through until like you lose. So if you keep winning, like you could be fighting 100 times. But you got to keep going until you lose. It's a really cool technique, and it does actually work. But this is a little different.
There is one constant though, and that is it's always a fight to the death. Again, apothecaries are able to heal most ordinary human wounds with ease, so these fights are often fairly no-holds-barred brutal affairs. Amputation and heavy trauma being the norm. Unsurprisingly, duels are the Blood Angels trial of choice, but others such as Dark Angels, Imperial Fists and Space Wolves also put this trial to their recruits.
Psychos!
War is life in the Imperium, and although some worlds know this more than others, planets used for recruitment usually have some form of regular combat going on. This trial is less a trial and more a means of assessing potential candidates. Astartes may have observed headhunting particularly strong champions, or they may watch them from orbit, observing infighting between tribes on Imperial feral worlds. In this trial, recruits are tasked to head out into their homeworld and slay a beast for causing chaos or harm to their world. Many Imperial worlds host highly dangerous life forms, or worse, orc infestations.
Imagine just sending a bunch of 10-year-olds at an orc. I know I'm stuck on the 10 thing, but like imagine sending a bunch of 10-year-olds at an orc. You're gonna get a squish kick.
Recruit must go out alone, or sometimes in small groups, and return with their captured hunt, often alive. With these group hunts though, the nasty twist is that there can only be one successful recruit, so they could turn on each other, break off alone to achieve or steal victory, I personally question the validity of this test. Fighting to the death to show strength over others seems plausible, but setting out in as a group, but then betraying other recruits seems to go kind of against the traits Astartes look for.
I was literally going to say this. That's the one guy that I wouldn't like. He shoots his mate in the back of the head. I wouldn't want him on my squad.
In recruits. Anyway, on returning home, they'll be required to slay their successful...
Right, look at his face. I know it's slightly warped, but doesn't it look like there's a little, like, one sec. He's got a little smile. There's his lips. And he's just like,
hunt in a ritual in front of their community before being led successfully away in the throes of glory. Lastly, the quite vague challenge trial. And this is exactly what it is, some form of probably unsurmountable challenge. This could be to attempt to fight a full-blown space marine in combat. An impossible task, you might imagine, but usually remember this is the 41st millennium and bizarre occurrences are abound. While the thought of a child fighting a space marine seems insane, remember the task is usually to see how they approach it, not necessarily their success.
it does sound insane.
In some extremely rare situations though, the aspirant may actually beat the Space Marine challenger. As completely impossible as this may seem, that individual usually will hold some unusual or rare power and will go on to become a legendary hero of the chapter. The aspirant will also usually be armed while the Space Marine unarmed and without his power armor. Still, as with most of the former trials, the test here is really about if they can just survive at all, not so much best their opponent.
You should get an instant in. Like, listen, if you beat, like, if you're a kid and you straight up beat a Space Marine, you should get in, you should get their gene seed. Like, fuck that, dude, give me the gene seed.
Other arguably more horrific tests though could be non-combat based and test a recruit's strength, speed, mental skill or resistance to toxins. So they might for example be forced to drink nightmarish toxic chemicals, lift weights so heavy they break their bones apart, or evade some kind of horrific dangerous trap. Recruits deemed to have succeeded by whatever standards, however unlikely, will then be restored by chapter apothecaries. Ultramarines and again Imperial Fists favour these trials.
That's a weird ass trial.
Clearly a great many recruits will not survive this stage of assessment, but even those who fail to be accepted but by some miracle survive will usually be heavily respected for having done so, not just by their families and friends, but by the assessing Astartes.
If my family or one of my friends told me they were doing this, I'd be like, yo, you want to get out of here? Like, we can go. It's okay. You want to get some ice cream?
Having done no wrong but maybe just not made the cut, these surviving but unsuccessful aspirants who were assessed on their home world may return to their former communities, a rare occurrence. Or they may continue on to serve the chapter as a serf, a menial but loyal servant who takes personal care of, say, a Marine's armour and weaponry.
Imagine going back to your family and being like, I didn't make it. People would just be like, your kid sucks, your kid sucks. I'd stay. Because like, if I've gone through all of that and like I've failed, like I'd stay. I'd be like, yo, I'll help. Just don't tell my family I didn't make it.
Those returned to their homes are extremely few, but surprisingly are not perceived as failures. It would be made clear to all that having just survived, they have shown sheer strength and integrity as an Imperial citizen. They would then likely go on to become a strong leader for that world as Imperial Guard, Planetary Defense Force, or some other leadership.
Alright, well that's not too bad then. At least you get some clout.
Successful aspirants will now become neophytes. They will move on to the next stage, where they'll begin the early stages of conversion to a full Space Marine with the initial implantation of the gene seed and chemical adaptation of their genetically enhanced organs. This could mean immediate departure with a Space Marine brother to the next phase, or it may be that they are allowed to celebrate in their home community before departure.
At least let him celebrate.
A very huge moral boost for the Imperial community there, and also to help reinforce Imperial values and loyalty. To be able to say your community gained a successful Astartes recruit is no small thing, and statues, paintings, songs and stories will be told for many years, if not generations to come. Neophytes will be expected to engage in training for combat as well as other mental training, as well as following chapter lore. If a neophyte should break chapter lore through ignorance or unthinkably by deliberately doing so, they will expect severe punishments.
Death.
A neophyte breaking chapter lore will not simply be thrown out, they would likely be mind scrubbed, live out their lives as either, best case scenario, chapter serfs, being menial servants, or worse, forcible amputation and body conversion to life as cybernetic drones and slaves as servitors.
Oh, the servitors. Damn.
Successful neophytes immediately will begin conditioning to be implanted with their gene seeds and relevant genetic enhancements. Space Marines must be male because the gene seed is only compatible with male hormones and genetics.
You want to say that to the Temple Institute?
So no, you won't see female Space Marines.
What? No way!
The neophytes also need to be tested for compatibility. I'm always kind of surprised that this doesn't happen before the recruitment trials, but
Yeah, no, really, you should have done compatibility before then.
anyway, so they're tested for compatibility, otherwise as with organ transplants. Rejection would be fatal for the neophyte. Even with this testing, it can still happen later down the line. They will then further have their mental strength checked before implantation of the gene seed begins, to ensure that they are in no way compromised by the forces of chaos.
Cool. Damn, this is a process.
If all these criteria are approved, the neophyte recruit will now become a Space Marine Scout, or in some cases a full Space Marine Initiate. They will live isolated in the Space Marine Chapter's Fortress Monastery on the homeworld, save for any approved missions. The individual will be tutored on battle methods, tactics, psycho-conditioning, values, and the history of his chapter. The reason these early Marines are titled Initiates...
So essentially they'll go to Marine School? Like Space Marine School, right? That's what that sounds like, Space Marine School.
is because it is still unknown as to whether they will even survive to the final end process of becoming a full battle brother. 19 organs grown from the chapter gene seed will be implanted to the neophyte initiate. Some are transplants and others are grown in the trainee marine's body. The gene seed will also adapt and change and grow the individual's body to become the giant size of a space marine, towering over ordinary mortal humans. Much of the body chemistry will be fundamentally reworked during this time, and the gene seed contains genetically engineered viral machines which rebuild the body to the template created by the Emperor. Any implant has a potential to fail, and this rejection will automatically end and probably kill the initiate. As if the odds weren't stacked against them already, this further thins down the number who survive to the end of this arduous process.
Yeah, y'all should check some stuff before they get into this. Just so it's like, because there's nothing wrong with going home to your family and be like, that wasn't a match. Sorry, couldn't have the organ. Shame, right?
In brief, the 19 implanted or grown organs to become a full Space Marine are as follows. First, a secondary heart to increase blood supply and capacity. It can also pump steroids and extra adrenaline for battle situations. The os modular or iron heart, this strengthens and grows the skeleton of a space marine so that his bones will contain a ceramic based mineral which is added to an initiate's diet. After a few years, the space marine skeleton will be exponentially stronger than a normal human. The rib cage will have become fused to a solid bone plate, providing extra protection for internal organs.
Look at that, from 10 years old. Damn.
The biscopia is implanted within the chest cavity, and this increases skeletal muscular development, essentially muscle density. The hemastomen assists in carrying oxygen and nutrients more efficiently throughout the blood. It also assists in regulating the second and third implants. The Larraman's organ is also placed in the chest and manufactures synthetic Larraman cells. These serve like ordinary human blood platelets, but faster and more efficient.
Wait, how come
you can get the first one from 14, but you don't get the next two between 10 and 12. Do you not get them if you're above 14?
When a Space Marine is wounded, they form fully healed scar tissue in seconds, preventing hemorrhaging. This ability can make Space Marines appear invincible as they take wound after wound. Anything other than the most catastrophic of injuries is going to leave them still standing.
Why can 14-year-olds get hemostancer, but not Laraman's organ? Some of these numbers confuse me.
The catalepsion node is implanted in the back of the cerebrum. It allows Space Marines to avoid the need for sleep, entering them into a form of ongoing coma, allowing their brain the ability to systematically recharge by individual parts at a time. This enables them to...
That's like dolphins! Dolphins sleep half of their membrane at a time, like left side, right side. And the alternate keeps going so they can keep swimming.
Stay on duty for hundreds of hours. The seventh implant is the preomnor. It functions as a decontamination chamber above the stomach and will analyze ingested materials, neutralizing any organic or inorganic toxins. It also enables the Astartes to eat materials for sustenance that would kill ordinary humans.
Weird.
The omophagia is implanted in the upper spinal cord. It absorbs information through ingested DNA and RNA related to memories. The purpose is to gain tactical or survival information by eating animals or life forms indigenous on a planet.
Gross! That's eating people so you can gain knowledge. Like, that's people. That's not animals. You eat people.
In addition to a second heart, Space Marines also have multi-lungs as their ninth implant. 3 in fact. This is to give them extra oxygen absorption in thin air environments. In a toxic environment, their ordinary lungs are shut off to allow the third lung to act as a filter for any necessary toxins. The 10th adaptation is the ocular lobe. It's a gene seed adaptation that enhances eyesight along the optic nerves. This gives increased accuracy of vision and increased low light sight ability. Lyman's ear is not simply better for more accurate hearing, it enables Marines to resist ordinary human dizziness and for them to be able to filter out white noise and sonic attacks. The Sasan membrane allows a Space Marine to enter a state of suspended animation.
That's pretty cool. I'm just like listening and I'm like, which ones of these would I actually get? And like some of them, you know? Not all, but like some of them.
This can enable mortally wounded Marines to survive until help or an apothecary's arrival. This hibernation period has been known to be able to last for anything as long as half a century. Melanochrome alters the pigments in the skin cells, allowing an Astartes to shield himself from dangerous radiation and heat. Different levels of this in effect can cause physical differences between chapters, such as the very pale skin of the Blood Angels or the darker
I was going to say, if you don't mention the salamanders, you're a liar.
skin of the Salamanders. The oolitic kidney filters blood to further remove toxins that have been ingested in combination with the 7th organ. It is best not to think of this though like an ordinary kidney, as this organ functions to assist in removing toxins before they have passed through any normal process of absorption, otherwise it wouldn't be very useful. It also helps to regulate the advanced circulatory system and other organs.
Very weird.
The neuroglottis in the mouth allows a Marine to biochemically analyse things by taste or smell, or determine if something is poisonous or safe. Despite their advanced organs, this could still be very useful for a variety of purposes, and it can also enable them to track targets, much like a canine.
Like killing people. I know this is toxic. I'll eat it and I'll pass some to someone else that I want to die. That would be cool.
The muconoid is implanted in the nervous system and, if activated through an external treatment, will cause the Astartes skin to secrete a waxy substance. This will cocoon them to protect them in situations of extended suspended animation, even the vacuum of space or other temperature extremes.
Gross.
The Betcher's gland consists of 2 glands implanted in the mouth. These allow the Astartes to use their saliva as a corrosive acid when consciously activated.
Oh.
This could enable them to corrode bars if they were held captive or remove doors from their hinges. It also can assist them in eating difficult to break down substances.
Like, it's kind of cool that you can turn it on and off, but it's gross, the thought of having acid in your mouth.
Some Marine chapters have found that this organ no longer functions or has become less effective over time. The progenoid glands, or the gene seeds, are the critical organs of a space marine. They're implanted into the neck and chest cavity and serve as reproductive glands to allow their DNA to be collected upon death and safeguard the continuity of the chapter. Apothecaries of a space marine chapter will cultivate germ cells from the progenoid glands to create the 19 organs of a space marine, or some of them, because some are grown within the space marine themselves. The final organ is the black carapace, otherwise called the interface. This material is implanted under the skin of the chest with the now shell-like ribcage. Fibred bundles then grow inward and interlink with the Space Marine's nervous system. Points for these bundles are pre-cut by apothecaries and form neural connection points. The function of these are to allow a Space Marine to interface with the heavy power armor, or as some would have you believe, the armor's machine spirit. These connections enables faster reaction and maneuverability. Without this, Space Marines would lumber around very much encumbered by the heavy armour they wear. It's worth remembering that this whole process probably sounds heavily traumatic, but consider that it ideally happens on the young neophyte or initiates between the ages of about 10 to 12 years old and should be then completed by age 18.
So you've got 6 years of this, if not 8 years.
Many are going to suffer critical or multiple organ failure during the process. The penalty, or arguably mercy for this, is usually euthanasia, although
just take him out. Well, it doesn't work, and take him. Just take him. It's nice to them.
the conversion to a servitor for the chapter is sometimes an option, depending on chapters and their needs. Again, for those families who never see their sons again, in some cases, it's probably for the best. All they need to know is, he's serving the Imperium.
Like I said, just don't tell my family I didn't make it.
Now, more recently, since the involvement of Belisarius Cawl of the Mechanicum, Primaris Marines are a new breed of superhuman Astartes. Under instruction from Roboute Guilliman, Primaris Astartes are only created from the gene seeds of loyalist Primarchs.
Okay.
They contain 3 additional organs, and their gene seed is considerably more genetically stable. Guilliman had instructed Cawl to develop these new organs with the goal of creating the Primaris, and their additional organs are the SINEW coils. This enables the sinew of a Primaris Astartes to be durametallic, contracting with immense force, gifting them extreme strength and his body further resilience. This increased strength will literally enable them to crush the skulls of their enemies
So why don't everyone have it?
with bare hands. The MAGNIFACT, and this small lobe is inserted to the brain cortex. It secretes a hormone to increase the body's growth functions, with the goal of also intensifying further functions of the other implanted organs.
So why don't they all have this?
Apparently, this organ is in fact half of the immortis gland, the god-maker gland of the Primarchs. For undisclosed reasons, Cawl was only able to discover the right half of this gland, not the full gland itself. The left half had been fully eradicated from Imperial records by either the Emperor himself or others unknown. And third, the Belisarian furnace. This organ lies dormant and connects to both a Marine's hearts. In times of immense physical stresses, it expels chemicals simulating combat stimulants, increasing the regrowth of tissue, bone and muscle. This is a short-term use organ and requires time to recharge after using.
I'm not sure why not all of them have this then. Seems useful. Am I wrong?
Now, if this incredibly harrowing physical conversion is successful, the neophyte or initiate will have completed the arguably most challenging part of his transformation. However, during these changes, they will still be undergoing some of the most challenging training and assessment regimes humanity had ever known. Psychological and physical conditioning, subconscious therapy, and endless live battle training sessions. Their senses and mental abilities far exceed ordinary humans by the end of this process. Their mental toughness is beyond measure, and an Astartes will essentially ignore pain and environmental conditions.
I kind of ignore pain. I know that sounds weird, but like, I ended up hospitalized because I didn't realize I was dying at one point. I had a coma. It was a whole thing. So maybe I could make a good space marine because I don't really recognize pain.
An Astartes will assault enemies who, to simply look upon, would make an ordinary human suffer a complete mental break. Many, through endless conditioning, will develop photographic memories. Much of this round-the-clock therapy will also neutralize any latent character flaws and create stable, highly single-minded warriors. This endless mental and physical indoctrination will also teach and reinforce high respect for authority and to expertly carry out orders. With that said, it's important to remember that Space Marines are not mindless drones or clones. They are individuals, and while always following the rule of command, if a situation warrants it, they are entirely capable of disobeying orders if they believe it to be ultimately necessary. The consequences for this, though, could be, and usually are, potentially highly severe. At the end of this process, the few successful young children who are pitted against one another and survive
You don't need to call them young children, it makes it worse.
the ordeals to reach this point will be welcomed as successful young initiates, becoming full Space Marine battle brothers, Imperial Astartes, the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Astartes' aging, though, does seem somewhat random, with some living even as long as 10,000 years. But given the fractured and strange nature of time in the 41st millennium, it can be really hard to put accurate expectancies on this, and many Marines who are not killed may reach at least half a century in age.
Didn't they say the average lifespan for a Space Marine is like 28 minutes? Who said that? Who said that to me?
It's no exaggeration to state that on successfully becoming an Astartes, these men would be far from what you would recognise as human. Their extended lives and nearly unbreakable bodies are truly no prize. Their lives from this point on are spent in the sole act of defending humanity.
What a shame. Pick a better cause.
And the Imperium of Man.
Pick a better cause!
Accepting that their lives will be lost in battle at some point in the future, probably in horrific circumstances, they'll never see anyone they had ever known in their lives again. Families, friends will die far before they even begin to think of such things.
Before they think of their friends? Ouch.
Space Marines are the protectors. Humanity in the 41st millennium stands on a precipice. We've known many horrors, disasters, and catastrophes, the ending of many worlds, but the next millennia will be the most critical. Threats surround humanity, some still difficult to gauge just how severe and if we can resist them. Our hope is in the Astartes, and the Imperium of Man, and the Emperor. With the Primarch rulebook Guilliman returned, there was a glimmer of hope in the darkness.
No. And now Lionel's back. Lionel's now back. You know, that's another one. So that was the horrifying reality of wanting to join the Space Marines. Do you still want to join them? Did you ever want to join them? Let me know in the comments. But also leave a like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell. And, you know, I'll be here all week. The next episode is available on Patreon now. I am proud of you for getting to today. Even more proud of you for getting to tomorrow. Arrivederci, arrivederci, good as shooters, luego. Peace! See you on the next one. Bye!